your source for everything paranormal. Para-X. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Merry meet and merry part, bright the cheeks and warm the heart. For tread the circle thrice about, to keep unwelcome spirits out. Bide within the law you must, in perfect love and perfect trust. Mind the threefold laws you should, 3 times bad and 3 times good. These 8 words the read fulfill, and ye harm none, do what ye will.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron on the Para-X Radio Network. And now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
All right, merry meet everybody once again, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. My guest tonight is author Amy Blackthorn, and we're going to be talking about her latest book, Sacred Smoke. Now, she's been called an arcane horticulturist for her lifetime work with magical plants. She's also certified in aromatherapy and ordained through Griffin's Grove School of Shamanism, and she incorporates her experiences in a British traditional witchcraft with her studies. And she also teaches hoodoo, and through her company, Blackthorn Hoodoo Blends, creates tea based on old hoodoo formulas. And Amy, hi, it's nice to have you back.
Hi, thank you so much for having me back.
Anytime, and I'll rat you out already. We were already, before the show, talking about your new book coming out, so people are going to be jumping up and down because it's going to be good, but I won't give it all away. But you will be back again, I think is what I'm trying to say. It's funny because just as I was getting ready to delve into the book once I got it, I was reading the media sheet that came with it and saw the excerpt from the book about soul flight incense. So I'm having a look at that. And then when I get to the end, the last part of it says, grind ingredients together for best results before burning. And that just cracked me up because I had just posted on my Witch's Oracle deck reading for the week, the card that I drew was the mortar and the pestle. And I thought, okay, synchronicity just jumped in. Or the universe said, yeah, get to reading and quit fooling around or something. But it was really kind of like, it was one of those V8 moments, the light went on the head, and I went, okay, I'm listening now, yeah. So I guess we kind of have to start with the basics. Like, what is the purpose of sacred smoke?
Sacred smoke is the connection, not between ourselves and the universe, but to ourselves and the natural elements that surround us. We spend so much time in our daily lives connecting to our screens, whether it be television, our cell phone, or computers, that we lose that connection with ourselves. It almost gotten to the point now where people forget that we're living, breathing beings who need food and sleep and, physical touch. And we just delve so far into the world of online that we forget to connect with ourselves. So being present in that moment, being present with your nose, smelling the sacred smoke, the elements of nature creating the atmosphere that we need, all of those things come together in that single moment. Taking even just one herb, one plant, one material at a time and forging that connection gives us not only permission to stop what we're doing for even just a minute, but to ground and to center and to come back to who we are, where we want to be, and being present in that moment. It's not waiting for what's going to happen. It's not regretting or fearing what's happened in the past. It's just being present.
And that's, I think people forget to be at times. And, we get so busy that we forget the simple things, and that's not healthy and not right. But now a sacred space, I mean, sacred smoke creates sacred space. And you've written about the essential tools to create this space. For those who may not be familiar again with the term sacred space, why is it important for everybody, not just pagans, to create one? It's pretty vital.
It really is. When we look at the space that we're in day to day, we're thinking about our grocery lists and what happened at work and what our neighbor said, or whether the neighbor's dog is coming in the yard or digging in the trash. There's so many day-to-day things that distract us from being and the verb to be, that in creating a space, whether you are a witch casting a circle or you're just taking a little area of your time, the creation of that sacred space is removing the time. It's a time out of time, and it's a place out of a place. So all that stuff can be put outside the gate, outside the door, just for the moment your time is spent in that sacred space. You're giving yourself permission to be, whether it's meditating over incense or having a cup of coffee in the morning, but giving yourself that time in that space is so important, not only for our physical, but our emotional and our mental health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it clears up a lot of energy that needs to be gone, because, that's flying at us all the time, every day. And, some people say, well, okay, sacred space and happy place, are they the same thing? They can be, but I don't think they necessarily are. What do you think?
I think you're right. Being happy is great. You can carry that with you anywhere. But being in a place that is sacred is that putting some of the other expectations outside of it. We don't want anyone to think that they have to be happy and healthy and mentally square to be happy and to practice magic. Mm-hmm. By experiencing that joy, experiencing the happiness is wonderful. But if someone with chronic depression or a number of mental illnesses, that feeling of happiness can be so elusive. I don't want anyone to ever feel like if they aren't 100% where they want to be, that they can't be happy or that they can't practice magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think if you were to ask like 100 people about what the best thing to burn to cleanse their houses are, or their spaces, I mean, my guess is 99% would immediately say sage, because that's what you hear all the time. But there are so many more things that we can use other than just smudging with sage. So let's talk about some of the ways that we can create a cleansing smoke.
It's funny that you say that. It's gotten to the point where sage is a verb. It's no longer even just a plant. Even people who couldn't name 3 plants in their spice cabinet know what sage is. Mm-hmm. So you're right. The idea of branching out to embrace other materials that create sacred smoke is really great. Yeah. You need that excellent connection with more than just the things that we can find in the dollar store or in your mall shops. I mean, things like mugwort that grow in your yard can be beautifully connective. It can be really experiential for the cleansing of that sacred smoke. It can help get you outside of your own head. Even just delving into your spice cabinet before you go out and spend a bunch of money. I mean, rosemary. Rosemary is one of my dearest plant allies. The joy and the happiness that comes from that mentholated bite, it just triggers something in your brain that says, okay, everything's going to be great. Mm-hmm. People know that there's a lot of bringing back to zero that sage does, but nature abhors a vacuum. So you'd need an extra step that says, oh, what else can we put in here so that we're not leaving room for that bad stuff to come back in. Mm-hmm. So rosemary does dual duty. It can clear out that space. It can bring in that light and that warmth. Even something like the clove powder that's in the spice cabinet. It brings mm-hmm. joy and happiness. It brings luck into the home. I mean, there's so much more than just white sage. Mm-hmm.
And also, there are things like, the different herbs, but there's resins and there's woods too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I know it jumped out at me that you had Palo Santo in before I even was really paying attention to what I was looking at, I said, oh, woods, Palo Santo, I love Palo Santo, and resins, and I mean, it's unlimited as to what you can do to create the smoke, to create the ritual, to cleanse and purify and everything. But you mentioned in the book that smoke is so beneficial in cleansing and clearing. What is it about the properties of smoke that make it so?
One of the neatest things about this practice, I get goosebumps just talking about it, is when we talk, when I wrote about botanical magic, it was 90% of that was essential oils.
Mm-hmm.
And in sacred smoke, you're talking about the plants as a whole being. Both of them deal with the volatile oils, the oils that give these plant materials scent. So not only are you engaging with the plant spirit of each individual ally,
mm-hmm.
but there's a biochemical reaction in your brain that takes place when you encounter natural volatile oils. Each one acts on a different part of the brain, has a different effect within the body.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas just grabbing a stick of Nag Champa, is when you feel good burning it, it's a learned response. You
mm-hmm.
learn to associate Nag Champa or cherry incense with the feeling of ritual, with the feeling of that connection. It's a learned response rather than the biochemical response that happens in your body without you even noticing it.
Mm-hmm. I love Nag Champa also. I mean, it's one of my go-tos.
Oh,
right
yeah.
Off the bat. And, okay, we've got a question from the chat room talking about sage. It says, using sage causes huge amounts of smoke as opposed to a single stick of incense. So do they both work equally well? I mean, does the amount of smoke matter?
Great question. Oh, I love that. In burning even a single piece of sage, especially the white sage,
mm-hmm.
the amount of smoke is really important because of the method that we're using. So if you're using a single leaf or a single stick of incense, that's enough for purifying yourself. If you're having a smoke bath, if you're clearing yourself of anything that's negative, if you've been out in the world in the last 2 weeks and had to go shopping, the clearing and cleansing might just need to be you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to smoke out the entire house if you just need a little refresher for yourself. There's a really neat company, I'll have to think about what its name is. They're doing smudging wands or smoke cleansing wands of powders. It's like a giant incense stick that's in the shape of a leaf.
Mm-hmm.
So they're a little bit more sustainable. They're still using natural materials like ground sandalwood and things as a base rather than flavored sawdust. But the amount of smoke that's produced should be equivalent for the use. So if you're just cleansing yourself, you're having a nice gentle smoke bath, you can have a little bit of smoke for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone who's ever experimented with incense smoke, and especially resins, knows that less is more.
Yeah.
One frankincense tear is plenty, even for cleansing your entire house. You put too much more and you won't be able to see the far side of the room.
Yeah, and I think it depends where you get your incense, whether you make it, whether you buy it, but I've noticed that the incense from India is really pungent. Doesn't matter what kind it is. It'll knock you for a loop.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, Japanese incense is a little bit lighter and some of the other ones, but I can't do incense from India anymore because it's just like, oh my God, you get a headache immediately. And that's just me. I'm not telling everybody not to go out and get Indian incense, but there's just different degrees of, and if you're going to burn incense, it's a good idea to kind of test the water and see, what works best for you, because if it's going to put you off, it's not going to work.
That's one of my favorite things to tell people is if you have a new incense company, if you've got a new flavor you want to try out, that's fabulous. Take it outside and burn it. If it smells bad, if it's overpowering, if there's just way too much smoke that's involved. I mean, you want to know this stuff before you take it into your precious, precious home.
And spend your money too.
Exactly.
In the chat room, somebody's saying sage versus, say, dragon's blood as far as protection goes.
For protection, I always go for dragon's blood. White sage is good for clearing and for banishing, for bringing your space back to zero. But if you're specifically looking for a protective incense, dragon's blood is the way to go.
Mm-hmm. And she also says that she always thought that motherwort was also good for protection.
Motherwort is definitely good for protection. It's also a very strong sedative, so don't use it if you're also on other sedatives.
Okay, yeah. See, that's a good thing about your books. You tell people what to beware of, as well as all the other information. Because, and I'm going to jump up to what I was going to ask you down the line, but it comes up to this because I want to talk about stones, because you talk about stones and crystals with the smoke. And one of the things, where did I write that? Oh, okay. You talk about some of the stones are actually poisonous and can cause health problems just by handling them, and tragedy if they're used in an elixir. And so that's really, these things are important to know. The things that you need to look out for if you're pregnant, if you're on a sedative or something. You just can't pick stuff up and start using it because you just never know, And
Absolutely.
Thank you for putting all this stuff in the book. I mean, it's not like there's a skull and crossbones in there. I mean, it's just mentioned appropriately, and yeah, it's going to help a lot, because I swear, not that I know much anyway, but I never knew that, hanging on to certain types of stones would be poisonous and do that. What are some of the stones that you don't want to grasp tightly in your hand?
The very top of my list is stibnite. I've found it in a lot of crystal shops, and it's great for the magical uses of things like removing attachments or anything that's negative from your person. Think of it as a knife cutting away anything that needs not to be there. But the poison of stibnite is antimony. When it breaks down, it's antimony poisoning. So you can handle it, but wash your hands very quickly. Don't hold it for long periods of time, and definitely don't put your fingers in your eyes or your mouth after you've handled it. But stibnite has gotten very popular because it's an organic material that looks very shiny. It looks like a metal, but it looks like something that came out of a Transformers movie. So it's the aesthetic of it is very interesting. I saw a piece in Asheville, my trip to Asheville last year. There was a very large piece of it that was bigger than a sheet of paper. And the gentleman had his very small child in there handling everything and waiting for something to get dropped or broken. And the gentleman who ran the store had to tell him, that is a poisonous rock. You need to control your child, please. It's more than you'd have to pay for any damage. That is poisonous and could actually damage your child. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't occur to people that rocks can be poisonous, or that rocks can dissolve in water, or that they can be scratched by your fingernail. Yes, absolutely.
I just learned something.
Selenite, the very, very popular selenite.
Yeah.
One of my favorite stories is from working at a shop called Mystical Voyage in Baltimore from 2006 to 2010, and we had a woman come in for these gorgeous, gorgeous selenite candle holders. They were a slab, they were cut, and they were big enough to hold a tea light. Mm-hmm. And it radiates this beautiful brilliance throughout the whole room. And she bought a pair of them. Mm-hmm. And a week later, she came coming back in and, hey, can you help me find them? Absolutely. You must have really liked them to come back a week later, and they're probably $30 for a pair of candle holders. Mm-hmm. And she says, oh my goodness, yes, but you know who loved them even more? Was the fairies. I say, can you explain to me what you're talking about? They apparently had gotten some wax on them, and she decided to put them in the dishwasher to clean them off. And when she opened the dishwasher was empty. She says, God. The fairies must have made off with my candle holders. I better replace them. They must have really liked them. I had to explain to her, no, selenite is a salt, and you just dissolved $30 worth of stone in your dishwasher.
Wow, is it very porous or?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
It's porous. There are shards of the material, but it's actually a salt. So it's a 1 on the most hardness scale. You can scratch it with your fingernail.
Okay.
It is the softest category of stone. But yeah, it's a salt. She dissolved it in her dishwasher, just like the people who dissolve their Himalayan lamps in the dishwasher.
Yeah, I knew better than that. And it's funny you mentioned selenite, because I was doing a pre-record for a show coming up, and the lady was talking about unicorns and stuff, and selenite is a very favorite of unicorns. It's a very grounding stone for unicorns, just so you know.
I did not know that.
Yeah, see, you learned something too. We traded, but yeah. So then now I'm going to have to go out and get some selenite because it's rather amazing. But you know that certain things are good, you know that certain things are bad, and again, because some people don't know that you can make elixirs from stones and herbs and stuff, and again, you can get poisoned by some of the stones. You know, the bad stuff leaches into the water, and you could get really sick. So, you know, again, thank you for putting these little warnings in there because you just don't know. I mean, it's it's needed to be said, and some people just overtly forget about it, and so good. All right. So let's talk about incense for a second. I mean, it's very powerful in many ways. Now, does the power of each type of incense depend on who is burning it and what the intention is or the reason?
The intention is very helpful, but the plants are only going to do a certain number of things. So if you pick something for its grounding properties, that can be sort of a gateway to prosperity, because we think of prosperity and fertility coming from the ground. But if you pick something that has completely opposite associations, it's banishing, it's protective, it's not necessarily going to make you more prosperous. You can't the intention is only going to get you so far. So the intention is great and it's really helpful, but there's only so much that it can do. It's not going to magically change its correspondences. The intention is going to direct it as much as it can, but it's not going to change the way they work.
Okay, that makes sense. Got another question from chat. Love those questions because they're very smart people in the chat room. She has a question. She says she has used orange peels, dry them up and burns them. And she says they seem to work just as well as sage, if not better at times. Any opinion on that?
Absolutely. Orange has such there's the list of things that orange can do actually takes 3 pages in my notebook. It's associated with the sun, and it's got that fiery element to it. It's protective. It's strengthening. It balances and adds harmony to a space. So it works fantastic for this. There's orange is actually in a few of the incense recipes in the book because it's so well done. You can grind it up to a nice fine powder, or you can leave them whole. It still has a lot of volatile oils even after the peels have dried. So there's a lot of accessibility for that volatile oil, for that scent. And you can still get things like action and affection and ambition all wrapped up in those little peels. They pack a punch. There's a lot more volatile oil in the peel of that orange than there is in the leaf. I talked briefly in the book about there's a hierarchy of our plant allies in the realm of smoke. So sage is only one plant material, and leaves are have a lot less volatile oil and a lot less, we'll say, oomph than seeds or fruit or woods or resin. It's sort of the very basic bottom of the list amount of oomph. So the farther up you get, the more heavy lifting is involved. So something like dragon's blood, which is a resin, carries all of that essential goodness in it and has a lot more power behind it because there's more capability. There's more thickness to it.
And resins, you just mentioned resins. Now, how are resins formed or made or created?
I love that question. So one of people's most favorite resins to work with is frankincense. It's one of the most popular. And it's funny because once you plant a frankincense tree, it takes 20 years for it to start growing enough to the point where it can make that sap that will, when the plant itself is cut, that sap starts to leak out. It starts to try and heal that wound. So it drips out and it dries, which is why frankincense is called frankincense tears. It dries in a little teardrop shape. So each frankincense tear is such a compact and full plant material that when it's dried and burned, it puts off lots of smoke and lots of fragrance and lots of oil. But they're the sap of these different trees, like the Dracaena draco, the dragon tree, is where dragon's blood comes from.
Right.
The Some of them have a red edge, like it's related to the red edge Dracaena you can see for sale in grocery stores and garden centers.
Mm-hmm.
But it grows in tropical locales. So takes all that sunshine and turns it into this really gorgeous sap. And because the leaves are very pointed, they look like little swords. The leaves can actually cut you. When each leaf breaks off, it leaves behind a mark on the bark that looks like a scale, looks like a dragon scale.
Mm-hmm.
So that blood, when it dries, is our dragon's blood resin. And it looks like a dark red chalk for anybody who hasn't seen it in person. And it's really lovely. It's dark red, and it has a warm, spicy, clovey, sweet smell. That is very musky, and it's really comforting.
Yeah, and very protective.
And very protective.
Yeah, it serves a whole number of purposes. What's really interesting to me is storing and keeping things like resins safe. I mean, because don't they either start to decompose or lose their potency after a while?
They really can, just like on the other material, besides honey. They can break down over time. Exposure to oxygen can really shorten that shelf life. So I always make sure that with our resin friends, I always keep them in an airtight glass jar and out of direct sunlight. So I have a big bookshelf on wheels in my office where I keep all my magical materials, and they're out of direct sunlight. They're in an airtight container. When they start to lose their color and their scent, you know it's happening. So make sure you rotate your stock if at all possible. Making sure that you're leaving the newest stuff for later and using up whatever you have on hand now. The way I do it from the kitchen is I take things that are in a spice rack and they get to stay there for a year. Anything that's left over after a year, that gets replaced, and the jar, the bottle, what have you, goes upstairs into the mad scientist laboratory that I call my office. And then those get used for sacred smoke purposes afterwards. I replace it, put it in the kitchen, and at whatever point it starts to lose its color, it doesn't have that strong of a smell, you know it's time to go in the compost pile.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Visually, can you see it? Can you smell it? Or just, is there like a specific time that you can figure that they're probably, like, if you've had it for 5 years, maybe not a good idea to try and use it. It might crumble when you look at it twice, but yeah, so it's color and it's fragrance, basically.
Yes, absolutely. My mother had a jar of basil that she just never used, and it had expired probably 10 years ago, and she still kept it in the spice cabinet. I found like this has got to go. Yes.
You wouldn't have to grind it. That would, you open it up and it would turn to dust on its own, huh?
A strong breeze comes by. Yes, it's gone.
Oof, there it goes. Yeah, exactly.
That's a different kind of cleansing.
Yeah, that's neglectful things that happened on the way to do it. We're going to take a quick break for about 2 minutes, and when we come back, we've got a whole bunch of more stuff to talk to Amy about. So stay put, everybody, and hang there. We'll be here.
Don't go away. There's more Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks right after these important messages.
Hey there. I don't know if you've heard, but there's a great new radio show on Para X. 2 hosts, 1 hour, and too much fun. Stephanie and Heidi not only talk about the latest goings-on in the supernatural worlds, they live it. They want to hear from you. They want to help you understand and guide you. And they want you to tune in. So, grab a friend or come alone to gather around that metaphysical table with Heidi and Stephanie. If you're interested in the worlds of the unseen, tune in to the Gathering Radio Show, Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern on Para X Radio.
Just in time for Halloween. Explore the second edition of the Witch's Oracle deck through 45 innovative cards and enhanced guidebook that peers into the world of the witch. The deck's stunning artwork has a new look and includes 7 brand new inspirational cards. Each card now includes a suggested crystal or gemstone to enhance your reading, as well as a magical incantation that provides energy, reinforces the card's meaning, and helps the desired message to be sent out into the universe. The easy-to-navigate guide also has a new look and offers straightforward, gentle guidance that takes readers through both good times and bad. And now includes a chapter on crystal and gemstone divination by the amazing Nicholas Pearson. The deck can also be used in conjunction with tarot, the Witch's Oracle. It is a perfect divination deck for witches as well as non-pagans, and is designed to suit both seasoned readers and beginners alike. Find out more about the Witch's Oracle deck at marlabrooks.com, and is now available for pre-ordering from schifferbooks.com and amazon.com. Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Yes, we're back, and that's a really quick 2 minutes. I'm here with Amy Blackthorn. We're talking about her new book, Sacred Smoke, and so much to cover and so little time. So let me jump right back in. We talked about stones before, that you have a chapter in the book about working with stones, with the smoke. By adding stones, you ground your intentions in the long term. How does that work?
I really love being able to have a touchstone reminder of the workings that I've done. Some people do that with mojo bags, or, felt bags, cotton bags filled with herbs and stones that actually you can have in your pocket, and every time you reach your hand in there, it gives you something, a touchstone to reach back and remind you of your intention. It reinforces it every time you touch it, every time you are reminded that it's there. You reach in your pocket for your wallet and just happen to brush up against it. It reminds you, oh yeah, I've been working on my prosperity. So by utilizing stones, you have a literal touchstone to keep you grounded in that intention for the long haul. You can remember the smell. You can re-experience that ritual every time you touch it, every time you see it, bump into it, reach in for your wallet, what have you. But it takes you back to that specific moment in time where you cast that spell or you set your intention, and it takes you that millisecond to remember, oh yeah, this is my intention, and it feeds that intention again. It draws that attention to it and gives just a little bit more energy to it. Every bit of energy in your little piggy bank for each intention, make sure the longer effects are understood and experienced.
Yeah. I think, whatever works for you, but it's just kind of, stones are magical, Mm-hmm. You can use them, like if you're listening to the commercial for my Oracle deck, now we've got stones as well as incantations to help the messages come alive. And just how therapeutic is it to just hold a stone in your hand and just kind of rub it? They're like as a worry stone, or just, it just feels so good. And they're really important in any magical workings, and not just magical, just for everybody. It's nice. It's like worry beads in a sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And layering that intention with a stone that works together with your herb that you used, and everything working together, just adds another layer to the experience and to that magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every little bit, it works. Okay, so you talk in the book about different herbs, and you've got a really great bunch of them in there and a lot of information about them. But since this is the Yuletide, and actually you did mention frankincense before, tell us a little bit about frankincense. I almost said Frankenstein. That would have been cute. But why is it related to the Yuletide season? What are the properties of frankincense? Churches, they use frankincense all the time. Give us a little 911 about that. 411.
911, 411, same thing.
Yeah, this cold is really getting to me badly.
Anyway. It's funny. When starting to do the research for this book, I started talking to friends and family members and whatnot about what their experiences are. Do they know what frankincense is? Do they know what it's used for? And growing up with a mother who's raised Catholic, she has that association of frankincense and myrrh in church.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny because the number of people I encountered who thought frankincense and myrrh was just one long word.
Right.
That it was one thing, and they always coexisted together, and they were only just one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see the church nativities, and the 3 wise men brought frankincense and myrrh and gold, and you don't think about why that was, or why it was used, or why this was a gift until you understand that gold, frankincense, and myrrh were worth their literal weight in gold.
Wow.
So not only were they providing beautiful gifts for Mary and Joseph, it wasn't that they were supposed to burn the frankincense and myrrh. They're providing years worth of salary for the people who are supposed to raise the next king of their faith.
Wow.
So they didn't have to worry about money. They could buy a house. They could settle down. They didn't have to go and work another job. They didn't have to work in the fields. They didn't, what have you, because they had the money they needed. They were gifts from the 3 kings.
Mm-hmm.
So in the associations are protection, they're purification, definite boon for blessing newborns, no matter what your faith.
Mm-hmm.
It's always associated with spirituality, and lots of different religions revere frankincense for that beautiful connection. Strength, both physical and emotional strength. You're having a hard time at work, and you just want to sit down and cry instead of go to work. Grab that frankincense. It's a beautiful connection. It's grounding. It's connecting. There's a little bit of citrus on the backside of your nose. It brings up your energy level really nicely without making you feel jittery or bouncy. It connects with astral projection and psychic awareness. So if you're doing work that connects with the third eye, if you're really reaching out, or you want to start a new tarot practice in the new year, that's a great thing to burn, to make a connection with, and to really set that intention. Frankincense is also associated with justice. So if you have a working that you need to do, if you have a court case coming up, if you got a bogus speeding ticket, whatever it is, that justice can be there for you with frankincense. It's also a great balance, especially if you connect it with myrrh. You can burn both of them together. There's a lot of different availability for frankincense out in the world. If you're burning myrrh by itself, the smell isn't as great. I think that's one of the reasons they pair it with frankincense. Mm-hmm. Cheap myrrh smells like feet.
Yeah, myrrh is one of my favorites. I like myrrh oil, and I burn myrrh incense, but I got a myrrh one that was just like, bah, okay, never mind. No. And you know what? The same thing happened, though, with dragon's blood. I had never smelled dragon's blood, and I went and got some dragon's blood incense, and it was putrid. It really was. And then I thought, oh, my God, all these people are saying how wonderful dragon's blood smells. What's the matter with them? It was just really bad. And then finally I said, maybe it's me. And I got some oil and tried it that way. And dragon's blood oil. And then I thought, oh, that's not so bad. And then I went and got another incense, and it worked better. So, it's... That's kind of the problem, I think, with a lot of fragrances and things. It's quality versus, oh boy, it's going to turn you off forever about it. And you never know. You never know. With incense, I would say, if you find a brand you like, stick with it, because most of their incenses will all be pretty good. And the same thing with essential oils and things. And when you make up your blends and stuff, oh, thanks. We have an ex policeman, a retired policeman in the chat room who said, "Well, dried human blood is very putrid too." Thank you, Hitman.
He's not wrong.
No, he's not wrong. No, there's nothing worse than that. But yeah, when you get the ingredients for your blends, you probably had to go through a few different people that sold in order to find the thing that really worked well for you, right?
I really did. And the more natural, the better. one of my favorite things that I discovered over the years is a company called Fred Sol, S-O-L, like the sun.
Yeah.
He's just sitting out in his little hut in the middle of the desert in Arizona, and he takes bamboo sticks and dips them in melted resin and then hangs them up to dry, so you get resin on a stick. So you don't need incense charcoal and a million other things to burn it. You're just lighting the tip, and it's real resin. It's not pressed sawdust that smells like a resin. And so that was a game changer. I didn't need tongs and spoons and knives and forks and what have you. Just light the tip of this incense. Frontier has a really lovely whole dragon's blood that you can buy by the pound. That's got a little bit of a sweeter. So there's two plants that are both considered dragon's blood, Dracaena draco and the Dracaena cinnamari. One has a little sweeter. The cinnamari has like a little sweeter of a smell to it, rather than the musky, smoky, warm. But they're both incredibly lovely. But you have to. There's work that goes into it. There's a ritual that takes place of the lighting the charcoal and getting your tongs or your incense resin spoon, and it's so meditative. Just even getting ready for the burning of that material, that's just transcendent.
It is, and I used to get a big kick, and I still do. Some of the charcoals that I get, when you light them, they sparkle.
Oh yes,
I love that. I mean, I just assume I'll put resin on it, but boy, I like to sparkle just by itself. First time I did it, I thought, oh, that's magic. Well, first time I thought something was wrong with the charcoal for a minute. And then I realized, oh no, this is really, really nice. So yeah, and I don't know that a lot of people that I know anyway, don't use resins and charcoal. It's easier to light a stick of incense or use an essential oil or something. But it's pretty magical to do, as you said, a ritual thing. It doesn't take that long, but it is something that you do. You're kind of preparing it, and just like if you're cooking, you just get all your ingredients together, and looking forward to the actual cooking. So yeah, that's very
absolutely cool. Before I started writing the first book, I had to go to a family funeral. It actually inspired my writing because we went back to my mom's old neighborhood. One of her great aunts had died, and someone I'd never met. So it's a funeral that doesn't have any emotional connection, just the family obligation to it. So my mother hadn't arrived yet. We were driving separately from an hour away. So my aunt was there, other family members had arrived, and this was not too long after the Baptist part of the family just found out I was a witch. So there was some angst there. There were some feelings about that. And my mom hadn't arrived, so I was really anxious, and it was jittery and sort of fidgeting in my seat. Wanted to get this over with because I wanted to be there for the obligation part, but I really didn't want to pick a fight with anybody. I just wanted to do my business and go home. And so the ceremony started. And so the procession comes in, they're swinging the censer back and forth, they've got the casket rolling behind them, the priest is in the back, he's carrying a big cross, there's things are happening. Mom still isn't here. Okay. And the funniest thing happened, all of a sudden, I was okay. I was ready for the thing. I was ready to do whatever it was that I'm supposed to be doing. And it happened in the blink of an eye. Like, what exactly happened? And it took me probably 5 seconds to figure it out. My very first high priestess was a recovering Catholic. So she was, every time we had ritual, every time we did anything, she would smoke out the ritual room. It's probably a 10-foot square room with as much frankincense and myrrh as she could find. And it was pretty foggy in there, I'll tell you. So then we would ground and center, and then we would start our ritual practice. But my brain didn't know we weren't in a ritual. All it knew was I encountered the frankincense and myrrh, and all of a sudden it switched into, okay, I'm ready for ritual. There was no conscious thought at all. It was just me having that biological switch in my brain flipped. Okay, I'm ready for ritual now. I grounded and centered without even doing it intentionally. Planted my feet, and I was ready.
It's so amazing when you encounter a scent that you haven't smelled in a very long time. And it takes you right back to certain things. 40, 50 years if you're old. But yeah, every scent has a certain memory to it, I think.
Do you know why? When you're going through your days, every day is a sheet of paper in a box.
Mm-hmm.
So the last time you smelled lavender, okay, you take a deep breath and you encounter that smell before you can recognize that it's lavender. Mm-hmm. Your brain is flipping through that box of papers that's taking the top, off the top, until you get to the most recent time you smelled that smell. And you look at it and the sheet says lavender on it. It doesn't go back to the very first day you were born and go forward, because primacy and recency, we want to make sure that it's the most recent thing. We know that it's, okay, that's lavender. It has to pass through all of your memories before it gets to recognition.
Wow. That's interesting. Because, I just love those feelings. All of a sudden, you smell something and you just kind of get out of your body for a minute. But you remember something. It takes whatever is on your mind at that moment when you smell it, goes out of your mind, and you go right back to that smell.
The really beneficial thing about that is that because this is a copy of a copy of a copy of your first memory of lavender, if you have a negative association, if there's trauma associated with a certain smell, you're not experiencing the first time you smelled that, you're experiencing the most recent time you remembered it. So that copy of a copy of a copy, it tends to get a little blurry after a while. So it can really blur that trauma, and it's something that can be processed out. You can condition yourself to have a new association with that smell and with that experience, and it can lessen the physical impact of that trauma. You're not reliving the physicality of it.
I love that. Yeah, that makes good sense. I'm trying to get everything in before we're going to have to leave, but one of the things that I really do want to get in is, talking about herbs, and I'm going to jump quickly to the drying stage, because here's another thing I learned in your book. You mentioned several ways to do drying the herbs and stuff: microwave, dehydrator, oven, but you mentioned the benefits of drying them also in the refrigerator as well, and that's something I've never heard of, and it started to make sense. So why is drying in the refrigerator? Because you would kind of think it might be a little moist in there, not necessarily, but why is that such a great method of drying out your herbs?
It's so ingenious. The first time I saw it, I almost fell out of my chair, because the dehydrator that occurs in modern refrigerators, there's a little heating coil that lives both in the bottom of the freezer and in the bottom of the refrigerator that turns on, and it heats up really quick to dry up any moisture in the refrigerator to keep things from getting moldy. Because it's dark in there, and there's always constantly moving air throughout that system. Yeah. So not only is it not getting bleached by the sun from hanging up in your office or your attic or your kitchen, but you're keeping the color, you're keeping a lot more of the volatile oils because you're not exposing it to heat. And so you get this beautiful, pristine, whether you dry it as a stick or you're drying loose herbs, you get to keep the integrity intact of each plant material. And it dries a lot faster than just hanging it up in your kitchen, because there's no moisture in the humidity, there's no moisture from cooking or cleaning, bath, shower, all those things contribute to the moisture content of your home. So this doesn't have to combat any of that atmospheric moisture, and it just dries faster.
It's one of those things you never would have thought about it, but it makes sense when you explain. But it really caught my eye. So I read books to learn, and some books you do learn from. Some books you learn that you picked the wrong book. But all of your books, I just love getting all these kinds of information. And I've got one more we're going to talk about in a minute that just made me smile. But the books, to sum things up, we can make sacred smoke for a variety of reasons, from a variety of ways. And the book has great recipes. It has spells. It has tools of the trade. It has information on specific stones and herbs and some really interesting hints about spell work. And that being said, I never really thought about flash paper as far as spells go. But let's talk about the benefits of using flash paper when we're doing spells. It makes so much sense.
It's one of the neatest things. It was actually a tip that my first high priestess, she used it for everything. And it's so neat. The same sparkle that we get from our charcoal is what ignites the paper. So they take tissue paper and they soak it in this solution. Once it's dried, now if you're ordering it online, it'll be shipped wet. So you take it out of its plastic and you lay it out flat to dry, because otherwise it could combust in the mail. We don't want that. So it's tissue paper that's soaked with this combustible material, so that way it's sold in 1x2 sheet booklets or large sheets. When you ignite it, when you touch it to a flame, you can touch it to incense, it immediately bursts into a ball, a bright flash of light. It's what magicians use to make that flash in their palm of the hand.
Yep.
So there's no smoke, there's no heat, just a flash of light. There's no ash left behind, nothing to clean up, and no one's piecing together your wishes and hopes and dreams out of the fireplace.
So that's kind of like a so mote it be at the end of the spell, yeah?
That's exactly what it is.
I've got to try that. I mean, I'd probably scare the heck out of the cat, but some days he deserves to be scared. But yeah, I mean, it's really kind of fascinating about all these things, refrigerators and flash paper and all that. And with all the recipes and things in the book and tools of the trade, I mean, we didn't really get to talk too much about herbs. We've got just a couple of minutes before we can start wrapping up. But so what are some of your favorite herbs for sacred smoke?
There's a section in the chapter on plants that I really thought was important. We spend so much time looking outside of ourselves and in exotic locations for plant materials that feel magical. But honestly, one of the most magical things are plant materials that come from your very own property, your very own yard. Your grass in the front yard probably has plantain growing in it. You have those neat little spikes. They're flat leaves and they're oval shaped and have little vines and ridges up the back of the leaf. It's plantain and it's considered a weed. And it's one of the neatest things for adding happiness to your home. You don't have to spend a lot of money. Just go out in the yard and pick some, dry it in your refrigerator. The same goes for clover, both white and red. Clovers bring joy and happiness and excitement right into your home. The red is a little sweeter smelling than the white, so I usually will pick that. There's lots of vitamin C in it, so I actually will brew it into a tea, have it with my morning tea ceremony, and then whatever's left, I can dry. It still contains volatile oil, and I'll use little bits of that and add it to my magical incense right on hand. So being able to work with stuff that's right in your yard is not only empowering, but it gets you to know your land, know the spirits of place, the landoids around where you're already staying, where you're already living.
Right, exactly. Now, if you're making up some concoctions and working on a recipe, are fresh dried herbs better than like store-bought herbs, like fresh cloves and things like that?
Only for the things that you can find near you. Having them more recently dried means that there's more volatile oils, there's more minerals, everything's as alive as it's going to be as a dried plant. The longer it remains dry, the longer since it was alive, the less volatility it has, the less spark that it has. Right. So if you can have something in your yard or from your garden, there's a section on things you can grow yourself, like growing your own basil or rosemary. Dry it and use it as quickly as possible. And if you have an emergency, run to the spice cabinet second.
It still works, but not quite the same. Yeah, exactly. All right. So now that time is marching on, we're going to have to march in a second. I want to give you a chance to give out your website so people can find out more about you and the book and your other books and Blackthorn Hoodoo Blends.
Absolutely. You can find out more about my writing and my journey to writing. And there's a little blog there on amyblackthorn.com. And in order to find signed copies of my books, they each come with treats in store, or my magical tea line, blackthornhoodooblends.com.
And tell us a little tiny bit about the Hoodoo Blends. What can people get there?
It started from my very first job that I made the decision to leave. It was a toxic workplace, and it was very stressful, and I was responsible for the lives of 45 floors of people. I was head of security for a large corporation.
Ouch.
And it just got to the point where my soul couldn't handle this stress anymore. It's, so I actively uncoupled from this job. And my very first day as a happily unemployed woman, I went downstairs to try and figure out how to start the next part of my journey. And so I grabbed a candle, and I grabbed my cauldron for my safe burning materials, and I grabbed some Van oil to really move out anything that needed to go before I could start my new job, before I could start my new life. Mm-hmm. And I anointed this candle, and I had all this attention going, and I worked up a frenzy, and the doorbell rang. And my first thought was, that's the fastest spell I have ever cast. It was the mail lady. She was dropping off a package. So I go back into the kitchen, and I'm getting ready to light my candle when the smell of the lemongrass and my Van oil that I make just drifted up from the candle. And I had this thought, wouldn't it be great if I had a Van tea, so I could drink my Van tea and think about my working while this candle burned and the light bulb goes on over my head. Mm-hmm. Wile E. Coyote style. I've got to make my oil blends into actual teas, actual functioning, delicious teas, not those mystery bags of dried herbs that you see on the shelves in old shops.
Right.
But the vibrant, colorful, enjoyable, tasty drinks that can be either enjoyed as tea or turning your morning ritual into a ritual, taking the things you want to bring into your life and bring those parts in when you're already doing your morning tea ritual.
I think everybody should go and look and see what kind of blends you got cooking and what, they all have different ingredients, different reasons, different purposes, whatever. But I think it would be a good thing to look it up and just have a nice cup of tea.
That would be lovely.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you again for being with me, and I'm looking forward to the next book. I know, I'm impatient. What can I tell you? And I want to thank everybody for listening in as well. And until next time, everybody, blessed be and merry meet again.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Please join us again next week at the same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2024. The Mysterioso March by Kevin MacLeod is licensed through Incompetech.com.